Hello and welcome to Strategic Brand Management. I'm Jo McGregor and I will be your support person for this entire semester. So the focus of this video, where we've been and where we're going. So essentially covering off weeks 1 and 2. The focus really will be on assessment 1, what's it all about, and assessment group setup. So in week 1, we introduced you to strategic brand management, and in week 2, this week, the focus is on consumer-based brand equity. Now, a friendly reminder, assessment 2 is a group-based project, a brand audit, and you have the opportunity to select the brand that you would like to work on. So if I could encourage you all to finalise your groups before the end of the week, before I make allocations. And it's much better if you actually choose your own group, because you get to work on the brand that you're most interested in. Revision for week 1. So here are on the slide are 3 of the core brand unit objectives. Now, in this topic, we identified there are a number of definitions of what constitute a brand. However, there is, although there's some different definitions, there is some commonality in these definitions. That is, a brand is an identifiable object that makes a promise of value, with strategic brand management being the effective management of the tangible and intangible aspects of the brand in a holistic manner. Now, brands have evolved over time from a form of identification, differentiation, and personification to a more open construct in which the consumer is more involved in the branding process. And that's primarily, as we know, due to advances in technology. Now, the case for brands was made for both consumers and firms. Brands were identified as being important to consumers because they assist in information processing, increase consumer confidence and satisfaction when in the process of buying. Now, for the firm, brands were shown to be important because they offer organisations higher levels of customer loyalty, trade leverage, increase the effectiveness of communications, and also facilitate growth via brand extensions and also a form of sustainable advantage. Now, in terms of the next 3 core learning objectives, essentially the terminology specific to brand management was highlighted this week, and the model of the integrated framework of consumer-based brand equity and financial-based brand equity was presented. And that's really to highlight the dimensions of brands that must be considered for us as marketers so that we manage them in a strategic manner. And finally, we looked at the roles and tasks of a brand manager. And this was really to highlight that it's not an easy role and there's quite a lot of complexity involved. Now, on to this week, week 2, consumer-based brand equity. And there's the first 3 key learning objectives explain how brands work in relation to consumer behaviour, discuss the function and value of brands, and you need to be able to define and explain brand equity. So essentially to date, this topic is centred on the very important concept of brand equity. And that's really the key to developing successful brands for the long term. Now, it was suggested that brands work on 4 levels in relation to consumers, offering a form of identification, security, added value, and even transformation. Now, the functions of a brand are many, ranging from a guarantee to an ethical function. Now, the concept of brand equity was discussed this week, and although there's no universally agreed definition, again, it can be seen as the incremental value gained by a product, service, or entity as a consequence of that brand name. Now, on to the next 3 key learning objectives for week 2. Now, essentially to identify the key sources of brand equity, this week we've touched on Callaw's model of brand knowledge. Now, this model is based on awareness, that is, a consumer's ability to recognise or recall a brand based on their perceptions and their associations with the brand. Now, Callaw's model identifies the need for a synergistic management of brand elements. the marketing program, and secondary associations. And this is to facilitate positive consumer brand associations and awareness, and to ultimately achieve profitable brand outcomes, which is everything that every brand manager aspires to. Now, consumer-based brand equity was defined, and this being the differential effect that brand knowledge has on a consumer's response to the marketing of the brand. Now, this is an important concept because it offers marketers a framework for developing, building and measuring brand equity. And essentially the focus for this unit will be on consumer-based brand equity. But it's important to have an understanding of financial-based brand equity as well, so that you consider that as part of the whole branding picture, if you like. They're equally important, but the focus will be on the consumer-based brand equity because the consumer is the most important aspect of it, of branding. Now, according to the model, the construction of a strong brand requires 4 key steps, and these are important for you to remember. Brand identity to brand meaning, brand responses to brand relationships. Now, this is a branding ladder, and each step is contingent on successfully achieving the previous step, with brand relationship or brand resonance being the ultimate goal of a brand manager. So essentially that is weeks 1 and 2 covered, very brief summaries, and I hope you've had an opportunity to listen to the audio or read the topic notes for this week. And the case this week, Red Bull, is an excellent example of a brand that has incredibly strong brand equity, and this will certainly be a good one to look at. So now moving along to assessment 1. Now the due date for this is going to be different for each student. So essentially if you're going to present on the Monday, you'd present your online presentation, and then the following Sunday, the Sunday after the Monday that you posted your presentation, that's when you'd be submitting your final written report. So there's 2 components. There's the online presentation, and the second component is the written presentation. And as we know, it's worth 20% of the total marks for the subject, and the written report is 2,000 words. Now for your online presentation, I'm quite keen for you to keep it fairly brief. It is difficult to keep it to 500 words, but that would be something that I'd be aiming for, and the focus really should be on the discussion forum, discussing the case. So what am I expecting? Now, in terms of assessment 1, here are the online presentation requirements. It's more of a guide, if you like. You can be a little bit creative, but this is a framework that if you stick to, you should be confident of getting a reasonable mark. So, number 1, a brief synopsis of the case, and for bonus points, a review of the week's topic. For example, in week 3, it's focused on brand positioning. So if you were to give a little overview of brand positioning and then an overview of the case, that would be very useful. I guess we can use the online forums as a means of a study group, if you like, so that we can all work together helping each other out. Now, in the presentation, you need to identify the key issues that have you've managed to draw on from your review of the case. And essentially, they're going to be linked to the week's topic. So that's a big clue for you. Now, once you've posted your online presentation, you should include a question. And that question should be linked to the week's topic and also the case. So let's take week 3 again as an example. So for example, with KFC. So would you expect to, such a question as, do you think KFC's current changes in positioning to address consumer health and environmental issues are credible? And this is really to encourage discussion in the forum, and it's also an opportunity for you to get some feedback. You can actually post the questions in that are that you need to respond to in the written part of your assessment. And you can actually post those as your discussion question and get some feedback from your peers. Now, I have posted on Moodle a step-by-step guide for managing the assignment 1 online, and that should make it very easy for you to know exactly what you need to do. It's fairly simplistic, and this week you've already seen one presentation, and you'll get to see another one next week. So looking at what others have done certainly helps you with managing your own presentation. Now, the end of the week is, for bonus points, is summarising the week's discussion, and that's really pulling out the key points that that have been made throughout the discussion forum. It doesn't have to be long, just a few, it can be dot points, but it really is a good way of pulling together the presentation discussion. And that's actually on the rubric in terms of your marking guide, in terms of the assessment. That is part of that requirement, which is the end of the week summary. So moving on. Then, in terms of the report requirements, once you've done your online presentation, and throughout the week you will be pulling it together, and this is again is a guideline as to what's required. Now, firstly, a brief executive summary, and this is not included in the word count, and it's essentially should be written after you've completed your case analysis, and that's really the core findings that you've come up with based on your analysis. Then an introduction, a brief introduction, and that's really to define the boundaries of your report, i.e. that you're going to be focusing on a particular case study. These are the areas you're going to be discussing, which are essentially 4 key case questions. And if there's any core concepts in, whether it's positioning or brand equity, that's your opportunity to define those concepts as in the introduction. Now, the body of your report is where you must answer all 4 of the case questions. Let's try that again. You must answer all 4 of the case questions. And you need to link your analysis of each of those case questions to theory and support it with some academic references and some further research. Now, with brands, they don't stand still and things change. So it would be great if you could include some more contemporary information in your case analysis as well. The focus should be on the case information, but it is appropriate to also include some new information, and that will demonstrate that you've actually gone a little bit beyond what's expected by doing some additional research. Now, just a point on academic references. An academic reference is one that comes from a journal article. And the reason why journal articles, academic references, are important is because they're far more credible than a book or an online source, because they have been peer reviewed, and that review process is very rigorous, and therefore they seem to be a lot more credible sources. A conclusion would be great at the end of your case analysis, and this is where you show what you think of the information that you've analysed, and provision of some recommendations. And this is where you say how the problems or the issues can be solved based on your analysis, and what you'd recommend as a course of action following your conclusion. And you would structure that based on the questions that you've been assigned to answer. And again, references, they're not included in the word count. Now, appendices. Now, if you've got some additional information, some research that is not specifically relevant to the report, but it's something that you've done some extra work with, and it is demonstrates that you've done some extra analysis, you can put it in your appendix. Now, in terms of formatting, make sure that you have a signed cover sheet, assessment cover sheet. I'll make sure that I have one available on Moodle. 12-point font would be much appreciated. You will note that I wear glasses. and it is becoming incredibly harder for me to see anything any smaller